Week 8 is in the books, and as always, it did not disappoint. We were actually going to try and release playoff projections, but honestly, man, we didn't even know where to begin when we were doing that. Heisman Trophy, same thing. Who knows? It's wide open, and national championship teams don't even start, right? This is the new era of college football, and we are absolutely here for it. We love it. Week 8 was a big week, man. Tennessee holds serve at home. They get to light the cigars. Indiana football makes a statement that they are for real this year, and Georgia boot scoots into Austin and dominates the Horns. Welcome into another episode of Always Talking Ball. Tyler Noe, Lance Barton. We have a loaded show for you, and as always, we are brought to you by Home Field Apparel. Lance, it's getting closer to November, so obviously it's hoodie season. You and I just got ourselves a couple new hoodies we'll be rocking on here soon. But you know the deal. If you're listening right now, head over to homefieldapparel.com. Find some good stuff. Type in promo code ATB15 at checkout for 15% off. If you're watching on YouTube, scan that QR code at the top right corner of your screen, and it'll take you straight to homefieldapparel.com. Once again, that's promo code ATB15 for 15% off. Let's start in Austin last night. That was the primetime matchup. It ended up being the worst of the two matchups probably. But that has to do with Georgia's mauling defense. That's really the, out of all four sides of the ball, the defense, offense, all that, they were the difference makers. And we'll get into it here, but they just absolutely crushed Texas in the first half. And it ended up being a 23-point halftime deficit, which ironically enough was what they faced at Alabama, except they're on the other side of it this time. And then, of course, the second half, Texas, they get into a little bit of a rhythm there on the first drive. They score. They get Georgia a couple stops. And then all of a sudden there is a penalty called and all hell breaks loose. And it was something that, I've seen people wave off flags before, but that's something I really haven't seen before.
No, we've never seen anything like that before. And I'm actually glad that Kirby acted the way he did after the game, talking about it, just like the precedent that they've set with that play. That's something that's definitely going to be talked about by a lot of people after the game, but I'm going to focus on actually what happened in the game. And this was a situation where that Texas offensive line, they had not seen anything like what they saw last night. We talked about it yes, I went back on my preseason predictions talking about that I thought that Georgia was going to handle Texas. I said that before the year. This past week, I picked Texas to win the game. I was wrong. A lot of you on social media
both did, and it was the same thing I did with Ohio State, Oregon. It's just we should have stuck with our preseason predictions.
Absolutely should have. But I did say that if Georgia would flip that switch, that if that Georgia team shows up, that Texas is in trouble. And that Georgia team showed up. They showed up in a bad, bad mood with rude intentions. And the difference in the game, no doubt, easily was the Georgia defensive front. Dude, they had 10 tackles for a loss and 7 sacks in this game.
Yeah.
That Texas offensive line, and I hate to sound like what you would probably imagine what a lot of SEC fans are saying today. Yeah, this ain't Kansas State and Iowa State. But it's not. It's not. That's not who they're playing in this game. Georgia, but here's the thing. A lot of other teams in the SEC can't do it. Georgia does either. We all know who I'm a fan of, and I'll admit it. Not even Alabama can do what Georgia can do across that defensive front with Mykel Williams and Jalen Walker and Warren Brinson and those guys that Georgia has on that defensive front. There aren't many other teams, if any, that can replicate that. So Texas got a rude awakening last night with their offensive line having to deal with that defensive front. No question about it. And the things that give the Kirby Smart, which is from the Nick Saban defensive tree, that's what it is. The things that give those defenses trouble are what, Tyler?
Mobile quarterbacks.
Mobile quarterbacks. Always have been. If you go back and look at Nick Saban's Alabama tenure, if you go look at Kirby Smart's Georgia tenure, really other than Joe Burrow, Joe Burrow was the main one that was had a common deal there that he just lit everybody up and lit Nick Saban and Alabama up and lit Georgia up. The quarterbacks that give Georgia problems and that defensive scheme problems are dual threat quarterbacks. And if you're a pocket passer and the defensive line that Kirby Smart's going to roll out there is just different than other defensive lines. If you can't block them, which most people can't, they're going to eat your quarterback alive. And like, I know that Texas did a little bit there in the second half to kind of get a little bit going there, but still, that was offensively still for Texas. They weren't really good in the second half either. And for everything that we're saying about this Georgia defense, I'm going to say this too. The Georgia offense was still not very good. They weren't. They averaged like 4 yards per play, I think. And all of their scoring drives were mostly all set up from their defense giving them the ball deep in Texas territory.
It's funny you actually mentioned that because I typed out their scoring drives and they had 3 touchdowns and 3 field goals, and their touchdowns were 13-yard drive, 34-yard drive, and an 89-yard drive. The field goal drives were 13 yards, 25 yards, and 4 yards.
Yeah.
So yeah, their defense really set them up in prime position.
Yep.
Carson Beck still looked, for some odd reason, terrible. Just overthrowing guys, throwing interceptions. I think for him, luckily, they had a 23-point lead, so he was able to kind of relax a little bit and hand it to ETN in the backfield, and who put up 3 touchdowns himself. So
that's where I want to go with this. That offense now has a chance to be significantly more dangerous moving forward by getting that guy going, getting a running back like ETN going, and him being able to run the football. Georgia being able to run the football obviously makes them significantly different as an offense. And ETN in the passing game, too. They were using him a little bit out of the backfield in the passing game, too. Getting that guy going makes this offense completely different. But you've said it before that winning, what is that saying again, Tyler? Winning masks
deficiencies.
Yeah, winning masks. Like, I don't know how many people are actually going to be talking about how still Georgia's offense has problems, and they do. But the good news is for them that as long as this defense, that was the healthiest that Georgia has been on defense this year, and they still had a couple of guys that were out last night. But overall, across the defensive front, Mykel Williams being as healthy as he's been all year, that bunch being healthy, Warren Brinson being back up front, they're just a different animal on defense, and it doesn't really matter as long as the offense just doesn't self-destruct, which they almost did. They had 3 turnovers. If Georgia doesn't turn the football over, defensively, Georgia's going to be like what we saw yesterday. And good Lord, dude, wasn't it so evident early on, just watching Georgia, just how they were flying around, their body language on the sidelines. It's like you saw it coming. You just immediately early on went, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like this Georgia team that we've been accustomed to seeing for the last 4 years is who showed up. And Texas did not know how to handle it. Texas's defense, I was still pretty impressed with. I was impressed with Texas's defense. But good news is for Texas, it's still moving forward. 12-team playoff. They're fine. I even imagine if they dropped another one, that even though whatever, that they would still at 10-2 get in or whatever. But that's a conversation for a later day. Man, it was just interesting that 1 week ago we saw them against Mississippi State, and they didn't have any sacks. They couldn't get pressure with just 4 guys. And I know they've got a mobile quarterback, but it's still just getting pressure is getting pressure. And last night they just got up in Ewer's face for the first quarter and a half that he was in. Then obviously Sark tries to just light a spark under his team, goes to Arch. He had a couple, had a run, but again, it was the offensive line. And then second half, you could obviously tell that they made it a point at halftime, like, offensive linemen, you guys got to do your jobs. And they did a lot better job in the second half, especially that third quarter. But yeah, the penalty and pass interference, which, again, guys, college football officiating is at one of the worst levels I've ever seen in watching college football for 37 years on this earth. Yeah.
And again, Kirby said it. The precedent that they set, which obviously they weren't trying to set this precedent, and you've seen people pick up flags before. If you're not sure what we're talking about, there was a pass interference penalty called on Texas after they picked the ball off and ran it back down to the Georgia 9-yard line. And 30 seconds after they spot the ball, after they called the penalty on Texas, they spot the ball for Georgia. And Georgia fans or Texas fans get upset. They start throwing water bottles on the field, and the end zone is just littered with water bottles. So that caused what, a 2, 3, 4 minute delay there.
Oh, it was five
And
plus minutes. Yeah.
yeah, and in that time, they didn't show us anything. They didn't show us the officials getting together, which apparently they did because they showed a replay of it. But the officials got together even after they spotted the ball, and they reversed the call. The guy said, I made a bad call, which, in his defense, it was a bad call. We all agree that. I mean, again, though,
I've never seen that before.
you just have to ask yourself is if they didn't throw stuff on the field and they didn't cause that lengthy delay, would they have had time to get together and discuss that? I have no idea if they were going to a TV timeout or not. Probably not, because it would have stayed Georgia ball. So,
no, that would not have happened if it wasn't for them throwing the ball on the field. And we've never seen the officials just basically like, oh crap, I messed up. I made a bad call. Let's change it. Like, on an unreviewable play.
We've seen guys like, I mean, again, it happens within 20 to 30 seconds where they call the penalty and then they get together. The other official comes in and says, no, you were wrong. Like, and they switch it, right? They wave the flag off. But this was a length. I mean, I've never seen it this long before. And so, yes, whether or not they intended to, the throwing the trash on the field definitely helped. And as Kirby said, it sets a dangerous precedent. Everybody was saying it online last night that if you don't like the call, just throw stuff on the field. And so I would expect the SEC, they've already come out and made their statement, but I would expect that they've got to do something about it. If stuff gets thrown on the field, it's an automatic like 15-yard penalty or something, which, again, like that's just so hard to police. I mean, these are college kids we're talking about. They've been drinking all day, and like, you know, it's just, I don't know how you get the word out.
It just means more in the SEC. So
I don't know how you get the word out to college kids and say, don't do this. Or, I mean, it's such a hard thing to police. It was a tough precedent to set. But yeah, it does just mean more in the SEC, apparently, even for Texas.
Yeah. So what do you think this means what does this mean now for Texas moving forward? Do you think differently of them after the game? And if so, like, how do you view them going forward? Like, do you think differently of Texas? Do you think they're still a national championship, national title contender?
Yeah,
like going into the game.
My first thought, yeah, I do think they are.
I do too.
Right now, if I had to say it, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Georgia, the national champion is going to come from one of those four teams.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, so I mean, you give me those teams versus the field, I'm probably taking those teams. Texas got a tricky one at Vandy coming up this week. Obviously, you know, after a big game, they didn't win the big game, but maybe they'll come in looking for revenge. They got to go to Arkansas, which they're flip-flop, man. I mean, waffling all over the place. You never know what they're going to be. And then they got that A&M game at the end of the year. So Georgia, on the other hand, they've got Tennessee, they got Ole Miss, they got Florida coming up this week, or in 2 weeks, sorry. Georgia Tech at the end of the year. So these two are still online for a meeting, not a meeting, but getting to the college football playoff. I think Texas, though, I mean, they have some holes, but I just think they have fewer holes than a lot of other teams.
Yeah, like I know that I just think last night was more of a rude awakening for them as far as handling the type of athlete that Georgia has on the defensive front. Most teams, again, can't replicate that. They can't. So with Georgia moving forward, though, what everybody needs to be worried about is we now know that when they do flip that switch, when you do fully have Georgia's attention, I just don't know what you. Again, they haven't lost a regular season game to someone not named Alabama in forever, and I just don't know what you do against that defensive bunch. And with Georgia, the scary thing is they're getting healthier now. I think Tate Ratledge will be back after the bye week for the Florida game. They don't really need him for the Florida game, but like either way, that run against Tennessee and when they play Ole Miss, he'll be back. These defensive players like Smile Munden will be back eventually. Michael Williams, Warren Brinson, all of them are getting healthier. They're going to be even healthier after the bye week. You got to imagine that Beck will improve and get better. Will he be the guy that we thought he was going to be going into this year? Maybe not, but he doesn't have to be that. He doesn't have to be a superstar for Georgia to win. He just doesn't need to turn the ball over. That's what he's doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
If he doesn't turn the football over, this Georgia defense is going to control almost every game that they play in. Like,
Yep.
I mean, we can talk about it more later, but like Tennessee, for example, that offense. Like, you don't think Georgia's not going to stifle that offense? Yeah, they are. And so, I mean, I just don't know how you're going to score on them, score enough points to be able to beat them because of how good their defense is going to be, especially if they show up in a bad mood like that.
Which is crazy to say because they just allowed 31 to Mississippi State. Like,
It is, man. It is.
You can't get a read on these teams sometimes. It's,
nope.
Week to week with college students, it's tough. But let's move on down in Knoxville where the Tide took on the Vols. They came in as 2.5-point favorites, 3-point favorites. Again, another sloppy game. It featured 5 turnovers compared to Georgia and Texas's 7 turnovers. And again, the Vols got shut out in the first half, 3 games in a row now. And then I jokingly, but kind of was half serious, texted you, and I said I think Tennessee's a second-half team. And, yeah, I mean, they did what they've done the past couple games and came out. Dylan Sampson obviously got a lot more carries in the second half, but they started getting more, traction in the ground game. Nico just kind of did what he has done all season. I mean, he threw for 190 yards. That's just kind of the quarterback he's become this season. Like, I think we were all kind of expecting maybe a Hendon Hooker type season where, you throw for high 200s, 300 yards, and he's just a 190, 200-yard quarterback this year. I think we kind of just have to
they're a run the football.
Take that for what it is.
They're a run the football and dominate with their defensive line.
Yeah,
that's what they are. They're a line of scrimmage team. And
but floor is yours, man.
Okay. So I'm just going to start now with what's wrong with this Alabama team right now. I'm going to take you into the mind here of the
how much time we got.
Yeah. We I'm not going to go too crazy here, but here's the problem right now with this Alabama team. You're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and you've got a lose-lose, no-win situation for a coach that you're in. We knew that this Kalen DeBoer situation following Nick Saban had a chance to be very dicey and a very tough, almost impossible situation unless they just came out and were gangbusters and just tearing it up. That was really the only opportunity that he had to not face what he's facing right now. But the problem is this. The leader of this football team, the number one team leader of this football team is Jalen Milroe. And he is the square peg that they're trying to fit in a round hole. He does not fit the type of offense that they were trying to run yesterday against Tennessee. Throwing the football 45 times with an athlete that might as well be a running back that can throw the ball is not going to work. Michael Penix, that type of offense that he ran at Washington, works, and it's an incredible offense. Obviously, that's stating the obvious for what we saw last year with Washington and the year before. Jalen Milroe is not Michael Penix. Jalen Milroe is not even Jake Haener, y'all, who was his quarterback at Fresno. He's not. Like, he is easily the third best passer of the 3 quarterbacks that he's had. Jake Haener, Michael Penix, and Jalen Milroe.
There might be someone in Sioux Falls better than him.
In all seriousness, though, Milroe is what he is, man. He is a freak athlete. He's the best athlete on the field almost every game they play. Kirby Smart said it after the Georgia game. That dude is the best athlete on the field and the best running back in this game. And he also happens to, and he was very nice by talking about, and he can make throws. But if they're going to drop back, Milroe can't drop back and be like a point guard and distribute the football to weapons all over the field and read defenses. He can't make the throws that they're wanting him to make. That's not what he is. That's not what he does. So the lose-lose situation he's in is this right now in Kalen DeBoer. He allowed this to be a player-led team for obvious reasons because of the weird transition going from the greatest coach. Everybody wants to say, well, we've never had a precedent of this. There's never been a situation where the greatest coach of all time, because there's only one greatest of all time, just leaves right before spring ball, and we have a transfer portal era like we do now, and all the stuff that you saw that happened in January. This team was held together by a few of the senior team leaders, mainly Jalen Milroe. So, you're going to bench him? How do you bench him? You lose the entire locker room if you bench that guy. You come in and you say he's not the guy at quarterback, you lose half your roster because all the players on that team love this guy. And again, he is your team leader. I know most people listening to this probably have seen this stuff about Lank. I hate that thing, by the way. But Lank and all that, that is literally this team's battle cry that he came up with. So, again, the lose-lose situation is if you bench Milroe, you make the fans happy because 90% of the fan base right now at Alabama does not want him to be the quarterback moving forward. If what they're going to do is what they're doing right now. If they're going to be a drop back and throw the ball 45 times, Michael Penix style Washington offense, he can't be the quarterback. He can't. If they're going to do what they did in the first half against Georgia and what Alabama did with Milroe against LSU last year and down the stretch last year, which is run him in the QB run game, like design QB runs. I'm not talking about he drops back, takes one look at Ryan Williams and he's not open, then he takes off running. Because that's what he does in the passing game. I'm talking about QB sweeps, QB powers, read options, speed options, all that type of stuff. That, if they do that, sure. That's what Alabama's offense should be. They've got maulers for offensive linemen that are catching people and pass blocking on every play. They've got two good tailbacks that they're not running the football with. And they've got a tailback at quarterback that they're throwing the ball 45 times with. So, this is a time, after this game, the player-led locker room stuff's not working. Alabama's undisciplined as hell. The amount of penalties, the amount of stuff that you're seeing going on the field and off the field and all of that, it's obvious that the player-led stuff is not working. They aren't the right leaders, and they aren't good enough on the field to be the quote-unquote player-led team. This is the opportunity that Kalen DeBoer has right now, for the first time since he's been in Tuscaloosa, to take control of this team and do it his way. And if that is Jalen Milroe going forward, then so be it. But he does not need to do it to where he's dropping back and throwing the ball 45 times and trying to be a Michael Penix-led type of offense. Kalen DeBoer and this coaching staff need to take control of this team. And if they lose a few players that are seniors in the locker room, the hell with it. So be it. And at least then the fan base will get to see, because the word is, everybody says that Ty Simpson has more plays, has the entire playbook at his disposal, the entire Kalen DeBoer playbook, because he can make all the throws in the Kalen DeBoer playbook. They've got not even near the full playbook for Jalen Milroe because he can't make the throws. He right now is just dropping back, looking at number 2, Ryan Williams, and throwing it to him whether he's open or not, or he's just dropping back, looking at him, and taking off running. You're going to hear a lot of people this week talk about the all-22 film, and they're going to be talking about how many players for Alabama and was running wide open in the secondary against Tennessee, and Milroe wasn't throwing the ball to any of them. And not only that, some of them that he was throwing, he couldn't throw it accurately. So it's a lose-lose situation for him right now, but the thing that he's got to do and that he gets paid $10 million a year to do is he's got to put this Alabama team in the best position to be successful. That's what he's got to do. And if it pisses off fans, if it pisses off the roster, whatever that is, he's got to do it. That's what he gets paid $10 million to do.
Yeah, I mean, he was blessed with Michael Penix, who had elite accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just dropping balls right into buckets last year. I mean, he had great wide receivers all across the board, and many times yesterday in this season. Yeah, Milroe's trying to throw fade routes and everything, and they're just, it's just not there. We've never thought he's had great accuracy, but
no. And this was this way last year, man. Yeah. He was this way last year until he started running the ball more. Yeah. Yep. Like when he had that 7-game stretch where he had like 17 total touchdowns and only 3 turnovers, a lot of those were rushing touchdowns. in him running the ball and keeping defenses honest.
Yeah.
So Alabama moving forward, for them to be able to even think about making the playoffs, I'm not even talking about a national championship, because right now, as it sits here today, they're not a national championship contender. They're not. Maybe that changes down the stretch, but right now that is absolutely not the case. For them to make a playoff run and to have the success that they want to have through this season, they're going to have to either change up how they're running this offense with Milroe at quarterback, or if they're going to be a basically air raid, spread you out and attack you down the field in the downfield passing game, they have to make a move.
You wouldn't look at Austin Mack at all?
No, I don't even think he's even in the picture right now.
Okay.
All the word coming out of Tuscaloosa is that Simpson can make all the throws, but the only thing I don't know is how good. I know he can make the throws, but can he make good decisions and read defenses and all that stuff? I have no idea.
Can he make the throws in the game that he
Correct.
Practice,
Can he be in Neyland Stadium in that absolute zoo of an atmosphere that we saw yesterday and make the throws? Yeah. And as far as Tennessee is concerned, they did what you have to do. Kirby Smart said it after the Georgia game. If you can limit and take away Milroe's legs, he's not very good. He's just average because he's not a good thrower.
Yep.
Tennessee has one of the best defensive fronts in the entire country. We know that. We knew that going into the game. They proved it even more. Tennessee's defensive front is freaking nasty, dude. God, they're good. They're really good. And they were able to limit Milroe. But offensively, I don't think anything different of Tennessee than I felt going into that game. I mean,
I was going to ask you on the offensive side of the ball for Tennessee. I mean, they did enough to get the job done, but do you credit Alabama's defense at all? Or, I mean, because
there were dudes running wide open for Tennessee.
There were dudes running wide open. And I'm telling you, if Nico could ever learn to just put a little touch on the ball or whatever, if he can dial that in, like, they're going to be great. But
I think he's
right now he doesn't have it.
He's just facing a confidence issue right now. He's got the arm talent. He can't, again, kind of what we're talking about a minute ago. Milroe can't make the throws. Nico can. He's got the arm talent to make every throw on the field. He's just not making them right now. He's struggling with a confidence issue right now. When it does click, if it ever does click for him, they're going to be dangerous offensively because the dudes are open. You're seeing orange jerseys yesterday running free through that Alabama secondary all over the place. Like if that were Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback yesterday, Tennessee probably has 40 points on the board. Seriously. Like in that same game with the same receivers running wide open like that. Alabama's defensive line and Alabama's defense, though, played absolutely well enough to win that football game.
Mm-hmm.
That defensive front for Alabama deserved better than what it ended up getting. It's just Alabama's offense didn't give them anything, and then they did that thing again there in the second half where they were playing the opposite of complimentary football. Bama's drive charts late in the game, when Tennessee took a 17-14 lead, Alabama had like 3 plays, 4 plays, 7 plays, 4 plays, 3 plays. Just awful. Putting the defense right back on the field, which is why Tennessee was smart, stuck to the run game with Dylan Sampson, and they leaned on that Alabama defensive line and started having a lot of rush yards at the end of that game. I think Tennessee had 40-something rush yards in the first half, and then they ended up with 220. That's what they ended up with in the game. So obviously the overwhelming majority of that came in the second half, and that was because the Alabama defense was gassed during that fourth quarter because they were on the field again almost the whole time because Alabama can't string together drives. They can't string together first downs because they're not running the football. They won't commit to running the football, and Milroe can't make throws. So moving forward for Tennessee, you have to be encouraged that at least the guys are open. And Dylan Sampson is legit. Tennessee's offensive line is dominant in the running game. And you just got to hope, if you're a Tennessee fan, that eventually it clicks with Nico, that he's able to start hitting some of those wide open receivers, and that you've got a defensive front that you can absolutely lean on. Also, the flip side of that, there were a lot of white jerseys running open in that Tennessee secondary as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just a matter of time, and it was a matter of time in that game yesterday. Like we said, he missed a couple open guys, and then he finally hit that one down the sideline. I think it was Brazel probably. Yep. And, you know, if he can hit 1 or 2 of those a game, it's a different ball game for Tennessee. So You got anything else to add on the Bama side or Tennessee side?
No, man, I just think moving forward with both of these teams, I mean, that was huge, obviously, for Tennessee because they have to go to Georgia at the end of the year. They could drop that game and win every other game. They're going to be in the playoffs. I think we can go ahead and say that.
Yep.
With Alabama, no more mulligans. I don't think I'll believe it when I see it that a 9-3 team were to get in, and so I don't think Alabama has any more mulligans. So with them going forward, they've got some huge decisions to make there, man.
Yep.
With that
And they're
coaching
kind
staff.
of they're stuck in like the at-large abyss right now because you know 2 losses in the conference. Kind of SEC championship game is out the window right now. Crazy stuff could happen. But you mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. They've got a big game at Baton Rouge in a couple weeks. I'm sure you're excited for that one. So we'll get to LSU here in a little bit. But let's move on to our third game. We're going to talk about the Hoosiers and the Huskers. Not much to talk about this one. 56-7, Indiana. I think people maybe expected Indiana to win this game, but I don't think they expected that bad. And both these teams were coming off bye. Matt Rule plays great as an underdog, but kind of different from Texas. And I'm saying that because everyone talked about the teams that Texas had faced so far. That's really all anybody had said about IU.
About how they hadn't played anybody.
What's that?
Just about how they had not played anybody.
Had not played anybody, and obviously Georgia's not the same as Nebraska, but it's a step up in competition for IU. Nebraska was thought of highly going into the season. They only had one loss. Yeah, defensively, we talked about them last episode about the defensive line and everything, and Indiana made them look silly. And even in the second half, without Curtis Rourke, who will be out for the Washington game this next coming week with a thumb injury, Taven Jackson stepped in. Threw 2 touchdown passes, had a great throw at the back corner of the end zone. But I think he only threw 4 or 5 times because they had such a big lead that they didn't need to.
Yeah, it's just obvious, man, that this Cignetti and Mike Shanahan offense is, every quarterback that plays in it is extremely efficient. They throw for a lot of yards, but the efficient part, it's unbelievable how a well-oiled machine that they are on offense. Just 4 or 5 guys. People are open constantly. The way they run the football, the way they mix in the run and the pass, how balanced they really are, and they can be. They are as impressive. It's time. You said this to me yesterday when we talked. If anybody doesn't want to know, I called Tyler yesterday and was just kind of going through it, having a moment because I've been so bad at betting on games this year, worse than I've ever been. If you follow this podcast, you know. If anybody's ever had struggling when you're betting on sports, you know how you kind of you just question yourself and everything. I was doing that yesterday, having a therapy moment on the phone here with my boy. And we were talking about, because I put out Nebraska +7 as a bet. I thought Indiana would win the game, but I thought it'd be a close game. And I came on this podcast even before the year and talked about how great Cignetti was and how great Indiana was and stuff. And there I am just giving out Nebraska +7 in this spot. And they just blow the doors off of them. And I'm just thinking about this. And dude, it's you've got to completely remove from your head the fact that this is Indiana. This team is a wagon because of this coaching staff and the players that they've implemented through the transfer portal that fits Cignetti's system really well. He's got a trigger man at quarterback, and we're going to find out this week with a bigger sample size how good this system really is, because I think you've even said, dude, most people are even saying it. They think that this backup quarterback guy, Taven Jackson, is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be
Tennessee
fine.
Transfer.
Yeah, he's going to be fine in this. He may not be Curtis Rourke, but he'll still be fine in this offense. So you've got to remove the fact that this is Indiana and they're not wearing a Ohio State uniform or a Michigan uniform or a whatever big branded uniform. This team is a really good football team, and they're a problem to deal with. And I don't care who you are defensively in the Big Ten. That includes Ohio State. If Indiana comes into the game with healthy, your defense is going to have problems stopping this offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially what we saw in that Ohio State secondary against Oregon. I'm equating. I've seen the IU wide receivers, and they're very good. They're all transfers. They're just, I mean, a notch below Oregon's wide receivers. And they could still get open. They're going to be schemed open, and it's going to be up to Rourke or Jackson to hit them. But what impressed me yesterday too was the defense. Defense played really well yesterday.
Absolutely. I mean, held Nebraska.
And that had kind of been their Achilles heel. Allowing 24 points to Northwestern, 28 points to Maryland, and obviously, hadn't played anyone, but they stepped up big. And the home crowd, obviously helped out. I mean, Memorial Stadium isn't a tough place to play. It's 52,000 people. There's really been no reason to ever add on to IU football stadium and, add more seats. But what Cignetti has brought to Bloomington in just such a short amount of time is just another reason why fans of programs that are tradition rich like Nebraska are just, I mean, they can't fathom it.
Yeah.
They can't fathom a guy coming in year one and being 7-0 and on a path towards the college football playoff while they're in year two under Matt Rule, who is a solid coach. We love Matt Rule, but again, they're 5-2. They lost at home to Illinois, and they just got their doors blown off by Indiana. And they just can't understand how Indiana football can get there and Nebraska can't.
Yep. Guys like Cignetti ruin it for everybody else. That not everybody is as good as he is. It's just not. Again, he was 119-35 as a head coach going into this year. Now, what is he, 7-0?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, 126-35 in his career as a head coach.
Yeah.
The dude just wins, man, everywhere he goes. And the culture that he's built at Indiana already, the system, the culture, it's just all came together, man. And College Game Day announced today that they're going there this week for the Indiana-Washington game. Good for Bloomington and Indiana getting an opportunity to host that. That's awesome.
It's the first time they've ever been to Bloomington on a Saturday. They were there in 2017 on a Thursday night when they hosted Ohio State. But when Cignetti came in and he started, saying really anything he wanted to. He was sounding confident and everything. He was at the halftime of the basketball game saying, Purdue sucks and, we're coming after Ohio State and Michigan. It was really, I mean, nobody really took him that serious. And, it's kind of like he can say all he wants. And if IU stinks, I mean, it's still IU football. But now they're actually backing it up. I mean, the dude looks like a genius.
Oh, he does. Let me ask you this now, moving forward. 11-1 Indiana, like 100% is in the playoffs, right?
I mean, we're going to have to do, and once we get to late October, early November, I love bringing blind resumes on here. And that's what Lance is talking about when he's talking about taking the IU off the chest.
Yeah.
And you put them next to a team like maybe an 11-1 Miami or an 11-1 Clemson. I mean, think about it. Neutral field, IU versus Clemson, full strength. Who are you taking right now?
I don't know.
I'm glad you have to think about it because I thought you were going to say Clemson right away.
No.
Which, again, Clemson's playing really well too. But the only team they've played all year, they got beat 34-3. Right? You look at their schedule, nobody really has said anything about Clemson like they were saying about IU through their first 6 games. No. And I think it's because they had a loss on the schedule already.
Mm-hmm.
But those two teams, I've looked at some power ratings. K-Ford Ratings has IU ranked ahead of Clemson right now, and he would favor IU on a neutral field.
Well, honestly, it kind of reminds me of this. You remember last year when Washington just kept winning games and nobody would take them serious? Mm-hmm. They just cute little low Washington. Even me was just like, they're not serious. They're not. Like, they're fun. Michael Penix is great. That offense is great. But no, they're not. And all they did was just kept going out and beating people. And then they favored Oregon by 9.5 in the Pac-12 championship game against them. And Washington just clapped those cheeks for them in the Pac-12 championship game. Like, that's kind of what we're dealing with right here at Indiana right now. Except Washington is even bigger brand than that. I mean, Indiana is for real. They are.
Yep.
And you're right. I don't know. I really don't know who I would take in that matchup. I think Clemson's defense, but I'm not going to launch off into that. But your point was exactly what you wanted out of that, was that I had to sit there and think about it.
Yeah.
And
so
it's it's going to be wild. It's going to be wild, man, because people in college football, across college football, are not going to be okay when the 12-team playoff rolls around and you've got a brand like let's just give an example, 11-1 Indiana, and let's just say like a 10-2 LSU.
Mm-hmm.
most college football fans are going to have a huge issue trying to think of, you're going to put Indiana in over LSU because of the brand names and stuff. And you look at Indiana and how good they really are. Yeah, if Indiana and LSU on a neutral field and lined up right now, Indiana's offense would get absolute buckets on LSU's defense. LSU, I think, would have success too. But again, point being is, you got to remove the brands.
Well, I'll ask you. I mean, 11-1 Indiana versus 10-2 Alabama.
I knew you were about to do that. Well, I think that Indiana's offense would have a ton of success against Alabama's defense.
I don't think Curtis Rourke will be missing wide open guys in the secondary. He's got the accuracy. I mean, gosh, if Curtis Rourke would have transferred somewhere like Auburn or somewhere like Alabama, or just anywhere like that, like.
Dude, I texted you in the middle of the game yesterday and said if only Alabama had Luke Altmaier or Curtis Rourke.
Yeah.
And it's laughable to think about that, but it's so true.
Yeah.
Like, it really is. It's so true. The actual pure passer of the quarterback position is much better at Indiana than it is at Alabama and a lot of other schools, honestly. Not just Alabama, but a lot of other schools. Big programs. Tennessee. Curtis Rourke's so much better than Nico Iamaleava right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, right now, the best pure passer in the SEC is Garrett Nussmeier. And outside of that, I don't know who is some great, at the moment, pure passer.
Right.
So, this is fun, man. Let's keep rolling.
Let's roll right into our ATB Weekly Top 12 rankings. We don't have to change anything at number 1 like everybody else does because that spot still belongs to Oregon Ducks, who went on the road to West Lafayette. 30-point favorites. They covered that spread. They had no letdown at all, even on 6 days rest. So good for them. They beat Purdue 35-0. We are actually in lockstep, I think, on the top 8. We have the same top 8.
Yep.
And we both moved Georgia up to number 2. Same record as Ohio State. Obviously, both have worse records than Penn State, but kind of using our eyeballs there, which, yes, some people have said our eyeballs have failed us. But Georgia...
well, resume, too. Resume and eyeballs say Georgia's number 2.
Yeah, Ohio State hasn't beaten anyone.
Nobody.
Again, the one team they played, they lost to. Georgia obviously went on the road. They beat Texas, number 1 team in the country. Oregon obviously has a win over number 3 or number 2 Ohio State. Those right there, I mean, I think they're the clear-cut 1 and 2. And then you take a step back and you look at number 3 and number 4, Ohio State, Penn State. They'll be matching up on the field here in a couple of weeks. Ohio State had a bye this week.
Mm-hmm.
I think Penn State had a bye this week too. So,
yeah, they did. And Ohio State gets Nebraska this coming up week. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the teams that are in the top 3 that we have 1, 2, and 3 are the 3 best teams in the country right now. Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3. And like you said, we've got Penn State. We've got Penn State at 4, and we've got Texas now at 5. I personally think Texas is probably better than Penn State, but resume-wise, Texas should not be ahead of Penn State right now. They shouldn't. Penn State's still undefeated. The resume-wise, it's not like Texas's resume is so much better or anything. I don't have it right here in front of me, but it's not like Texas's resume is so much better than Penn State. So I think that that's very fair where we currently have that right now. So Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, Penn State 4, Texas 5.
Yeah. I had a tough time with 5 and 6, honestly. I mean, resume-wise, I mean, you're talking Tennessee's best win is Alabama. They've also beat Oklahoma, same as Texas. Again, you can't do anything about the teams after you play them, but Texas went on the road. They played Michigan. They beat them.
It's not Texas's fault that Michigan sucks.
Yeah, Oklahoma was ranked at the time. Both teams played them. They both beat them. So, I mean, they're very similar resumes, in my opinion, with those two teams. The only thing is Texas lost to Georgia, which is a better loss than losing to Arkansas.
Yeah. I mean, Tennessee's resume, because they just beat Alabama, is better than Texas's. But I think we just both agree that we think Texas is better than Tennessee. Is that what is that what gave you the nod there?
Yeah, I would trust Texas on a neutral field over Tennessee right now.
Me too.
Number 7 and number 8, Clemson, Miami. We kept them really right next to each other. It looks like they are on a collision course in the ACC championship game, but SMU might have something to say about that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Clemson, again, another win over Virginia. I'm really not even sure who. I know Clemson's got.
They got Virginia Tech and Blacksburg coming up.
They got Virginia Tech and Blacksburg, so that's going to be a tricky one. They got Louisville coming up in a couple weeks, but Virginia Tech and Blacksburg is probably their toughest remaining game. Again, they get South Carolina at the end of the year. It's at home. And then Miami is number 8. And they've got Florida State coming up. They got Duke. They got at Georgia Tech, at Syracuse at the end of the year in the Dome.
That could be a tricky spot because Miami's defense is so trash. And Kyle McCord and that Syracuse offense is humming.
Yeah.
They can put up points to beat Miami. Okay, let's talk about Miami for a second. So, first off, good. You've had Clemson, correct me if I'm wrong, haven't you had Clemson ahead of Miami the last couple of weeks in your ranking?
I haven't. I was going to say, I noticed in your rankings, you dropped Miami from 5 finally.
I did. I moved Miami away. And that is, I just think that right now, again, this is one of those, you're splitting hairs with this stuff, guys. If you just go strictly, like if you want to go simple-minded and just go, it's only resume, sure, whatever. But if you're going like resume, like you do, combining resume, combining eye test, combining a bunch of different like things like power ratings, all that stuff. Like I just personally think when I'm looking at Clemson and Miami, I think Clemson's a better football team than Miami. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I did put Clemson ahead of Miami. But here's the thing about Miami. And I'm going to preface this by saying I am not saying Miami is 2019 LSU, okay? But what I'm saying is this point in the season of 2019, there were a lot of question marks about the LSU defense at that time. Auburn, back when they had Cam Newton, there were constantly questions about Auburn and Auburn's defense the whole year. Against the teams that they play, it really doesn't matter. Because who in the hell is going to stop Cam Ward in Miami right now on their schedule? When you look at their schedule, who is going to stop them? Nobody. As long as he doesn't just self-destruct and throw 5 turnovers, 5 picks or something, you're not stopping this Miami offense. There's only a handful of defenses, and they're not on their schedule that can stop them. Clemson is the only defense in the ACC that has even remote chance. And I think Clemson can slow them down, but you're not stopping this offense. So at this point, I don't give a shit what Miami's defense is doing. Now, ranking them compared to the teams that we have ahead of them, that's where I give a shit. But as far as them going forward in the ACC, dude, you're not going to hear me when going into games, well, Miami's defense or whatever. I don't care. They're going to outscore you. Like the only way you're beating this Miami team other than Clemson, Tennessee, Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, is you have to outscore them, these other ACC teams. And the only team on their schedule that has the chance to do that, in my opinion, is actually your boy, Kyle McCord and Syracuse in the Carrier Dome.
Yeah.
So we've got Miami at 8. And I'll let you go ahead.
I was going to say 9 through 12, we were completely different. We didn't match up at all, 9, 10, 11, or 12. So we averaged them out. And I had Indiana ranked at number 9.
I think I had LSU at 9.
And then you had Indiana ranked at number 10.
Yes.
So just one spot. So Indiana gets the nod as the number 9 team in the country, something that neither one of us thought we would be typing at all this year or really anytime this decade. But they've shown a ton. Obviously, we just got done talking about it with Nebraska. They've got Washington on deck. They've got Michigan. They've got Ohio State still. They should take care of Washington. They're in the point now. What we're talking about Indiana is they should win this game. They should win this game. They should beat Michigan this year.
Oh, yeah.
And
they're so much better than Michigan.
Ohio State game, it's on the road, and they're going to be huge underdogs. At least 2 touchdowns, depending on what happens between now and then.
Yep.
But, I mean, I can only imagine that is a spot that Cignetti would just relish, being a double-digit underdog.
100%, dude. We, as college football fans, need Curtis Rourke healthy and sharp going into that Ohio State game.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think Indiana is going to have a lot of problems with the Buckeye offense. That's fine. But I do think Indiana can score on them.
Yep.
I do. I 100% do.
And if you
And
remember that 2020 season where it was COVID, nobody was in the stands. They had a shortened season. They changed the rules midway to not allow IU to be in the Big Ten championship game. And Ohio State played like 6 games that year and went to the national championship. It was a weird year.
wasn't it
And
like 42-35?
it was 42-35 in Columbus.
Yeah.
That was
Michael
the
Penix.
last time IU really has put a product on the field worth watching. And Penix played extremely well that day. But it was just a weird year. I think this year is definitely different for me as far as IU. I think they've got a much more complete team that year. So that game should be interesting. But number 10, we had LSU. I had them at number 11. You had them at number 9. They averaged out at number 10. We just talked about them. But they've got a big one coming up this week in College Station.
Yeah, offensively right now, again, Garrett Nussmeier is the best quarterback in the SEC right now. He is the definition of the distributing the football to receivers. He can make every throw on the field. He also will throw a pick or two because he knows he can make every throw on the field.
Yeah.
And he tries to make some throws that are just a little too tight, fitting, but like, again, that's what they are. And dude, I think you could say that off the top of my head, that one of the best coaching jobs right now across college football, one of the best as far as coordinators are concerned, or is what Blake Baker and that defensive staff is doing with this LSU defense.
Heck yeah.
To think about how awful they were last year and still were bad at the beginning of this year, to think of where they are now is remarkable. And Weeks, we talked about him going into this game against Arkansas after the like 800 tackles that he had against Ole Miss, and he goes and follows it up and takes over the game at one point on defense for LSU. Number 40, middle linebacker for the LSU. Dude, their stock continues to go up. They've got a coach that, whether you think of Brian Kelly or not, he's a good football coach that always has teams that seem to improve throughout the year, and they get better. That's what they're doing right now. Now, they've got a huge one coming up this week in College Station. Seems like every week we can say that in these SEC games now. But a huge one in College Station this week. That'll be a massive test. LSU. I had LSU at 9. Did you have them at 10?
I had LSU at 11. I had Notre Dame at number 10.
Okay. I think I had Notre Dame at 12, didn't I?
Yeah, you had them at 12, so they slotted in at number 11. They're just kind of humming along. They've won 5 in a row since that loss to NIU. Obviously not playing a tough schedule this year. But again, we mentioned it a couple weeks ago. Everyone thought, Florida State, USC, toughest games on the schedule. No. Army, Navy. Army and Navy are on Notre Dame's schedule. They play Navy this week. Navy's the number 24 team in the country. Okay, so both these games, these Army and Navy games that everyone laughs at Notre Dame for scheduling and respecting the troops like they should, they're ranked games this year for them. So they're laughing right back at you. And right now, though, I mean, I'm scared out of my mind for Notre Dame to play Navy this week and play Horvath.
Yeah, dude, 100%. Let me ask you this. Would you rather play Navy this week or play Arkansas this week?
Yeah, I'd rather play Arkansas.
100%.
Sure.
Yeah, agreed. Would, as a Notre Dame fan, would you rather play this week? Would you rather play, let's say, Louisville, Virginia Tech, or Navy this week?
Yeah. I mean, that's an easy one, man. I'm wanting to avoid Army and Navy at all costs right now.
Right.
They are.
That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of teams out there that don't want to play. They don't want to play the troops.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons. Like the type of human that you're going against in this game, and then you combat that with how just hard this offense is to deal with.
Especially the Navy offense.
The Navy offense, yes, more so than Army. This Navy offense is, dude, again, I'm not smart enough scheme-wise and know the ins and outs of X's and O's. That's not what this podcast is. There's plenty of them out there that you can go and listen to for that. But I can't imagine, man, being a defensive coordinator trying to figure out how to stop this Navy offense. It is.
With
there's not another offense out there that does anything remotely close to near it.
Well, and the fact that Notre Dame, I mean, they just every single week, it's another injury, another player lost on the defensive side of the ball. Jordan Vitello's out, Benjamin Morrison's out. You'd think, normally against an Army and Navy, you don't have to worry too much about Benjamin Morrison being out, but they toss the rock this year. They do.
Yep.
And especially early in the game. And then all they've done so far is just build these leads. And then that's when they just run the clock out and they have 3-hour games when most games in college football are going 3.5, 3 or 45. So
yeah,
it's a tough one for Notre Dame this week. I don't think I still am not high on Notre Dame's offense. I know they showed a lot against Stanford last week. Yesterday, they just kind of
Stanford.
Yeah, and yesterday they just kind of, did their thing in Mercedes-Benz against Georgia Tech. They allowed an early touchdown. After that, the defense clamped down.
The passing game is still rough, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just it's
a little better, but it's still rough, isn't it?
It's better, but it's similar to like Tennessee. I mean, you can't hit open guys, can't throw a ball down the field.
Yeah.
Again, if they would just stick to running the ball with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, they'd be fine.
Yep. And so we had Notre Dame at 11, and we got BYU at 12.
Yeah, and I think we had BYU a little higher last week, but again, and we don't have Iowa State anywhere either. I think I had them ranked at 13th, so they're right there. They're right on the cusp, but the Big 12 is just a crapshoot.
I had Iowa State at 13 as well.
Yeah, and I mean, both those teams won, but 38-35 against teams that they should have. I mean, they were favored by at least 9 points in both games. So
yeah.
Again, they just keep playing with their food, man. And it's
none of these Big 12 teams are one of the 10 best teams in college football.
No, probably not. I would still even as a BYU and Iowa State are undefeated in the conference. I would still, if you had me bet on someone in the Big 12 right now, I would bet on Kansas State.
Well, me
Big
too.
12 conference.
100%.
So.
And I know we're probably going to get into that here in a minute too.
Yeah, and we're recording this at 2 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, and the AP poll just dropped. So obviously Georgia did move up to number 2. Texas moved back to number 5.
So we got that right.
Tennessee was up to 7. LSU stayed at 8. Clemson moved up. Iowa State moved back 1 spot. BYU actually moved up 2 spots, but I think that was more of a case of
where are they at? Where is BYU number wise?
BYU is number 11.
They're number 11. Okay.
Number 11. Notre Dame's number 12.
Where did they put Alabama?
Alabama's number 15.
Okay.
Dropped them 8 spots behind Texas A&M. Indiana moved up 3 spots to number 13 now.
Okay.
A little further down, you got Kansas State at 16. Boise State was on a bye. They got a big one this Friday against UNLV. They're number 17. Everyone else stayed status quo. Illinois moved up a couple spots to number 20.
So hang on. Indiana's 13. Who do they have at 10, 11, and 12?
Iowa State, BYU, Notre Dame.
Okay.
So they're all right around there.
That's interesting. Again, I maybe we're splitting hairs, but when I look at Iowa State right now and look at Indiana, I think Indiana's a better football team.
Yep. Mizzou dropped 2 spots at 21. Army stayed at 23. Navy up to 24. So I would take Army and Navy over Mizzou if my life depended on it right now. So
yeah.
All right, let's get to a little CFP discussion. I mean, where do we even begin, man? And we tried to do some, bracketology type stuff. And I think I got through 4 or 5 seeds and was like, I don't even know. What are we doing here? We can just talk about it. But I mean, where do you want to start at?
I mean, I guess I sent this this morning and you said you wanted to discuss this on the pod. So let's just go conference by conference. I'm just going to throw it out. This was literally just off the top of my head. I did a 1 through 7 SEC power rating. That's what I did. So again, power rating, for those that don't know, I mean, I know most of you do, but for those that don't know, this is just literally who I think if Team A played Team B on a neutral field, I think Team A wins the football game. As of today, this could literally change next week. As you've seen in college football, it does change every single week. But after yesterday's results and yesterday's games and what I've seen on the field, again, with my eyeballs, this is who I think Team A would beat Team B on a neutral field.
I'm gonna hit you up with the K Ford ratings.
Okay. Do you want me to go first here with what I've
go first.
Got? Okay. I've got Georgia 1, Texas 2, LSU 3. This one's going to be the one to surprise you. I've got Ole Miss 4, Tennessee 5, Alabama 6, Texas A&M 7. I think that right now, as things are constructed, that if LSU lined up on a neutral field with Tennessee, I think Garrett Nussmeier and that LSU offense would be a major problem for the Tennessee defense because Tennessee's defensive line is really good at stopping the run. And there were a lot of Bama open receivers running in that secondary against Tennessee. And I think Garrett Nussmeier hits those receivers like he's been doing all year and like he's been doing the last few weeks. But the biggest problem I know most people is going to have is where I've got Ole Miss. There's been some fluke games this year. The Kentucky game at Ole Miss was, I don't care what anybody says. I know it happened. I know it happened on the field. That's a fluke. Northern Illinois at Notre Dame, fluke. Alabama in the first half against Georgia, fluke. Like, those are flukes that we've seen this year, okay? And I think that if that Ole Miss offense and as good as Ole Miss's defense has been playing, I think if they lined up on a neutral field this week against Tennessee, I think Ole Miss wins the game. But I think that game between Ole Miss and Tennessee, if you told me, well, I would take Tennessee, I wouldn't really argue with you. I think it's very close. That's just what I've got. UGA 1, Texas 2, LSU 3, Ole Miss 4, Bama 5. Tennessee 5, Bama 6, Texas A&M 7. As far as the CFP discussion, all 7 of those teams are 100% in it. No offense to Vandy, okay? No offense to, I know there's other teams that only have 2 losses, and if they technically Mizzou with 1 loss, there you go.
Yeah.
Mizzou with 1 loss. Like, again, they've got a huge opportunity in front of them this week. What if they do go into Tuscaloosa? Like, there's no reason at all for me to sit here and say, well, Alabama's going to beat Mizzou. Like,
right.
No, there's no reason for me to say that. So if Mizzou does go in, sure, maybe they could. But right now, those are the 7 teams that I think they're the only 7 that are 100% down this stretch that are absolutely got a great chance to be a playoff team. Obviously, they're not all 7 going to be there. Only 3 or 4 are going to be, maybe 5.
Yeah.
But that's where I've got it.
Yeah, this is going to drive a ton of people crazy, but K Ford and I got pulled up Bill Connolly, the godfather of college football power ratings, SP+.
He's going to have Alabama higher than anybody else, probably.
He's got Texas. They both still have Texas to be favored by 2 against Georgia on a neutral field.
That's fine that they favor him. I don't think they would say that Texas would beat Georgia. I just don't.
I mean, I'm sure that line will get flipped very quickly by the public, right?
Yeah.
But he's got, so K Ford's got Texas, Georgia. He's got Alabama, 0.3 points lower than Georgia on the power rating. He's got Ole Miss at 4, Tennessee at 5, LSU at 6, A&M at 7.
So he's got Ole Miss at 4?
Ole Miss is at 4.
Okay.
Actually, Bill Connolly has Ole Miss at 3 overall in the country. He's got Ohio State, Texas, and then Ole Miss in a full point power rated than Georgia on a neutral field.
Yeah, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. But what I don't disagree with is, like, Ole Miss is still, just because they lost to Kentucky.
Yeah,
guys, we've seen a lot of results now this year in college football that are just like, you're like, it's been a weird year, okay? It's crazy stuff is happening in these games, especially the bigger games. Ole Miss leading the whole ball game in Baton Rouge at night against a really good LSU team. That is the Ole Miss team. That's how good they are and can be. Mm-hmm. That game could have went either way. You can't throw out the Kentucky game. If Ole Miss loses another game, they're not going to make the playoffs. Right. And losing to Kentucky is the reason they're not going to make the playoffs, as they should. Just because they'd be favored, or just because you think they're one of the 12 best teams, that is where the results on the field have to matter. If Alabama's sitting there at 9-3 at the end of the year and they don't make the playoffs because 11-1 Indiana gets in over them, if you're sitting around thinking, well, I think Alabama's better than Indiana or whatever, okay, that's fine. But the results on the field have to matter, and you can't lose to Vandy. I know Vandy's better than what they've been, but that kind of stuff has to matter. But as of right now, a power rating, that stuff doesn't have to matter when you're power rating a team.
Right.
You're just saying you think Team A beats Team B on a neutral field. And I think Ole Miss, so I guess I'm not dumb. Those guys have Ole Miss at 3 and 4. I had them at 4.
Yeah. There you go. All right, let's move on to the Big Ten. Who do you have 1 through 7 in the Big Ten?
This was the hardest one, in my opinion, even more so than the Big 12. 1 and 2, again, we saw these 2 teams play on the field, and I've got the team that lost. Power rated number 1 between them. I think Ohio State, I still today, if these 2 teams play tomorrow on a neutral field and the game is not in Autzen Stadium, I would pick Ohio State to win the game against Oregon. I would take my hard-earned money and probably lose because that's what I've done all year, and put it on Ohio State. But I would have Ohio State 1, Oregon 2, Penn State 3, Indiana 4, Illinois 5, and this is where just I don't know. I have no idea where to do it. But I went with more even like results on the field with this one. Iowa at 6, Washington at 7, Michigan at 8 is where I went with that.
No respect for Jonathan Smith's Spartans beating Iowa last night.
I know, man, but hey, Iowa beat the brakes off of Washington, before that, and Michigan State's lost to other teams too, or whatever. So that's just where that's how I've got that. And as far as playoff teams, I mean, I know technically Illinois is still alive, but I'm sorry, I don't think they're a playoff team. I just don't. I think that there are 4 teams in this league that you could say are legit. Again, I know Illinois is a contender, okay, by the letter of the law. But I'm saying, like, realistically, who I think is got the best chances to make the playoffs from this, I think it's between 4 teams: Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Indiana.
Okay. K Ford's got Ohio State number 1, Oregon number 2. He's got an 8-point gap between the two right now. So that kind of feels a little bit like Oregon Washington last year, right?
Yeah, it does.
Team wins. I mean, where they're probably going to match up most likely in the Big Ten championship game. Obviously, IU, Penn State, they got stuff to say about that. But if they match up again in the Big Ten championship game, you're going to see a big spread there. And Oregon could very well go in and do exactly what Washington did to them last year in the Pac-12 championship game. So Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, you're right with the top 4. Kelly Ford still has USC as the 5th rated.
I knew USC would be that. I meant to say that a minute ago. Sorry. I knew USC for sure. I thought would either be 5th or 6th.
Yep.
On everybody else's.
Yeah, so they're 5th. Wisconsin is 6th.
Interesting.
Iowa is 7th.
Okay.
Let me keep going here. Michigan is 8th.
Okay.
Maryland is 9th. I'm not done yet. Washington is 10th. I've not said a team that you have ranked. Washington is 10th. Minnesota is 11th. And finally, we get to the 12th ranked Big Ten team, 54th power rated team in the country, and that's the Illinois Fighting Illini.
Again, man, I understand how power ratings work. I do. But Illinois did go to Nebraska and they beat them. Illinois did play. I mean, they didn't play like great at Penn State, but Happy Valley at night, they held their own. Mm-hmm. And they were so much better than Michigan yesterday.
Yeah.
They were. They were a much better football team than Michigan.
For sure.
So, yeah, I just disagree with that. But I get why someone would have USC where they're at, but I'm sorry. I'm going to be one of the few people, like you tweeted out from our page yesterday, like, I'm done making excuses for Lincoln Riley and this USC team just because you've got a better system and more talent and all that stuff, and you just continue going to lose games. Like, guys, we're not talking about they're losing to Ohio State and Oregon and teams like that. They lost to Minnesota. They lost to Maryland. Okay? So, the hell with them on the power rating deal.
Yeah.
I'm not power rating them high.
Illinois Vandy, who are you taking on a neutral field?
Whew. Oh, Illinois.
Okay. They're both power rated the same on K Ford. So
okay.
Thought it was just interesting. But
yeah.
All right. ACC, what you got?
ACC, I've got Clemson 1, Miami 2, SMU 3, Virginia Tech 4. 4 and 5 was really where it was tough for me personally. Virginia Tech 4, Louisville 5, Syracuse 6, Pitt 7. I just went 7 because I don't think it matters after that. I know Duke's got a good record and all that. Good for Manny Diaz and the Blue Devils. That's awesome that they beat Florida State, but I didn't go any higher than that.
Okay. Miami's actually number 1. on
Yep.
K Ford.
Again, somebody told me, wanted to argue with me on that between them and Clemson. I'm not going to really argue with them. I get it. Splitting hairs.
Clemson's 2, SMU 3, Louisville actually 4.
Yeah. Again, I won't argue with that. I think if them and Virginia Tech played right now on a neutral field, that's a hell of a football game.
Yep. Virginia Tech is 5. Georgia Tech is 6. And Pittsburgh is 7th.
No Qs.
The Qs are power rated about the same as Michigan State and Navy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I know.
Okay.
I'm just as shocked as you are. But we mentioned SMU, man. They are chasing Miami and Clemson, and we talked about Miami and Clemson earlier. We kind of read down their schedules. We didn't mention SMU at all. SMU doesn't play any of them. So SMU's got a very manageable schedule to where they could go undefeated. And if Clemson trips up at Virginia Tech or Miami trips up, somewhere else, SMU could sneak their way in and face one of those teams. And honestly, if SMU wins out, they're 11-1. There's a possibility if Miami is the one that gets tripped up, you got 3 11-1 ACC team. So do you leave if Miami drops a game down the stretch? Say they lose at the end of the year at Syracuse, then Clemson and SMU play each other. Miami's done. They're 11-1. Are they in the playoff?
God, that would be that's an unbelievable scenario, bro. Because let's just say Clemson beats SMU in a war in that scenario. Are you going to punish SMU for playing that extra game against a good team like Clemson, where Miami got to just sit at home?
Or are you going to do the unfathomable and the unthinkable and something that would just absolutely blow up Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey's brains and put 3 ACC teams in there?
No, I don't think they would. But you're right, man.
So an 11-win team, either SMU or Miami, is getting left out in that scenario.
They are, and
with a possible Heisman Trophy winner, Cam Ward.
Yeah, if you look at SMU's schedule, that is, correct me if I'm wrong, they're going to be favored in all of their games going forward, right? Because they've got of the ACC teams, they've definitely got the weakest schedule. I mean, Miami's got a pretty weak one too, going down the stretch. Clemson still has to play Louisville, but I think they get a bye before they play Louisville, and they get them in Death Valley.
SMU's got to go at Duke this week. They've got Pitt, Boston College, Virginia, and Cal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I know SMU because of their brand and because they came from a Group of 5 conference first year in the ACC. Nobody really takes them serious, but that team can score.
We said it at the beginning of the year too. We said this isn't like another G5 to Power 4 transition. This is already a Power 4 roster.
It is, and they've got a heck of an offense with a great trigger man now that they made the decision to go to Jennings at quarterback. They've got a good team. So there'll be a problem offensively to deal with in the ACC. Yeah, and then America's
Conference.
We up at the same time. Look at that, trying to say the same thing. We didn't even have that scripted, guys. That was just we love calling it America's Conference. Big 12. Again, kind of a crapshoot, but I've got Kansas State 1, Iowa State 2, BYU 3. This was tough. 3 and 4 was tough for me. 2, 3, and 4 was tough for me. BYU 3. This one's gonna be hilarious. Here we are. Coach Prime in Colorado at 4. And I would listen to an argument if you want to talk about them in the same breath with Iowa State and BYU at this point, as good as Colorado is playing. And then I've got Texas Tech at 5. Yeah,
bro. I don't think you watched their game against Baylor yesterday.
Yeah, I know, man. Let me ask you this. So it's Texas Tech, okay, Arizona State. Well, Texas Tech beat Arizona State. It's Cincinnati. Well, okay, Texas Tech beat Cincinnati. It's Utah. No, they suck. It's Arizona. No, they suck. UCF. No, who knows what they are. So it's it's definitely not Baylor. So I don't know, man. I mean, really, you could just go the first 4 and go on. Where I would hear an argument, even though they just lost bad, I would listen to an argument with really any of those teams I just said and West Virginia. That's the Big 12, though.
Yeah.
That's the Big 12.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where you're at. I mean, so I've
Um,
got Texas Tech at 5 just because I said I didn't know who I was going to put there, and at least they beat a couple of the other teams that I was making it decide between. And then I put who cares after Texas
yeah.
Tech.
Yeah. You probably should have just put who cares after Colorado, but you got the top 4 right. Kansas State, Iowa State, half point separating those two. BYU, a couple more points down. Colorado, only 1 point separating those. And then number 5 was UCF.
Okay.
Number 5 is UCF.
I was going to ask if I could take. I was going to ask you if I could take a guess to see who it was, and I was going to say either UCF. I was going to say either UCF or West Virginia, but
It's not West Virginia. Number 6 is Cincinnati.
that's interesting. The reason why I thought it might be West Virginia,
Actually, the same exact power rating, 7.1.
okay. The reason why I thought it might be West Virginia is because the 2 games they just played were against who everybody thinks the 2 best teams in the Big 12 are, which is Kansas State and Iowa State. West Virginia just played them, and they were only getting 3 points from them. So that's how power ratings are done.
The 7th highest power rated team in the Big 12 is going to absolutely blow your mind.
Yeah, blow it.
Kansas.
Oof.
Again, not a resume ranking, power rating.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And then you got Utah, TCU, West Virginia, Baylor, Oklahoma State. I mean, all those teams are separated by a half point. I mean, 5.7 to 5.1 in the power rating. So that is the Big 12 in essence right there.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
So,
well, speaking of power ratings, let's just get to our last segment, man. Guess the spread time. It's 2:30 p.m. Eastern on a Sunday afternoon. Thank God for DraftKings and FanDuel. We already got early lines out for next week's games. So this is the time for you guys to tune in, see what Lance thinks. And we'll start on Thursday night. Big game in the ACC, Syracuse at Pitt.
All right, Syracuse at Pitt. Let's see here. I'm going to take a look at sorry, man, the microphone was getting messed up there. Syracuse probably getting 3.
3.5.
3.5? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Big one Friday night in Las Vegas, Boise State at UNLV.
This is probably the definition of like home field deal. UNLV's probably UNLV 1.
UNLV -1?
Yeah.
It's UNLV +3.
Oh, okay. Boise
State favorite on the road.
Okay.
College game day, we mentioned it. Washington at Indiana. No Curtis Rourke.
Indiana 4.5.
Indiana -7.5.
Whoo. Okay.
And I'll tell you, on a neutral field, K Ford's got Indiana 12.5 over Washington on a neutral field.
Wow.
So I mean, Curtis Rourke's good. I don't know if he's worth 7 or 8 points, but we'll find out on Saturday.
Yeah.
So IU -7.5. Nebraska at Ohio State. Nebraska obviously, took it on the chin this weekend, and then they get to rebound against the Buckeyes off a bye.
This result against Indiana just made this worse.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, Buckeyes 20. I don't know, man. 24, 24.5, something like that.
Buckeyes 24.
Oh, okay. Got one.
Neutral site again. That's what Notre Dame does at MetLife Stadium. They are taking on the Navy Midshipmen.
Notre Dame 10.5.
Notre Dame -14.
Wow.
It was 16 a couple days ago. I think I texted you about it, what you would make it, and you said about 13 at that time. So it's dropped down to 14 a little bit. So we'll see.
Okay.
BYU at UCF.
Oof. Well, you just talked about the power rating thing, so I'm sure UCF, it's probably UCF's not favored, right? I don't know. BYU -1.
It's basically a pick 'em. One side had BYU -1. One side had UCF -1.
Okay.
So basically a pick 'em right now.
Okay.
Mizzou at Bama.
Oof.
I want to hear what you would make the line on this one.
I mean, I'd probably make it around 2 touchdowns.
Okay.
I know just so, but what I think they've got it. Bama 17.
It's Bama -13.5.
Okay. So
So
my
you're
gut
right on
was
with
right.
Vegas.
Yeah, my gut was right
Don't
at first.
discount yourself. Yeah.
Yep.
Texas at Vanderbilt.
Texas probably 17 and a half.
19.5.
Okay.
Down from 21 a couple days ago before the Saturday games took place.
Yeah, again, think back, like Bama was like 20 something or whatever a couple weeks ago, and Bama's gaining some respect.
Yep. All right, here's a fun one. Oklahoma at Ole Miss.
Lord of mercy. I would think Ole Miss is a lot.
You're correct on that part.
A lot. Ole Miss 21.
18.5. Close.
Okay.
18.5. It'll probably get bet up, I would imagine, if people have been watching Oklahoma and the product they've been putting out on the field the past couple weeks.
Yeah.
So.
And if you're the Oklahoma defense, we're not going to launch off into it, but if you're the Oklahoma defense, I know they've got some guys that have pride and all that. But at some point, man, don't you just, if you're them, you're just like, screw this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like the offense can't get first downs.
I know. It's.
I don't know. I didn't even check it. Did they even remotely look at Jackson Arnold?
No, he played.
Oh, he did?
He played.
Okay.
Yeah, he played.
Was he really bad again, obviously?
At that point, there was already 21-0 or 24-0, and, defense kind of knew what Oklahoma was going to try to do then. So he, from the brief time I watched that game, he had a couple nice passes. So I would imagine they go back to him. He just burned his red shirt to come into that game, right? So if there's any talk about him redshirting or transferring, that's burnt.
My take on that, if they did do that, they've got, not like burning his red shirt and all that, but if they did make the decision to flip back to him, it's him moving forward.
Got to be.
It's him moving forward.
Gotta be. Yep.
And for the rest of this year.
Yep.
Okay.
5 more. Illinois at Oregon. We just talked about the power ratings. Illinois at Oregon.
Oregon.
Illinois, just tough road schedule for Illinois this year.
It is, man. I would say Oregon's near 3 touchdowns. So,
Oregon
around 3 touchdowns.
22.
22? Okay. So,
Yep.
near 3 touchdowns. That's what I need to start saying, because then I can be technically right.
Yeah.
Like if I say near 3 touchdowns and it's 22, that's near 3 touchdowns.
Yeah. I like that. This is a rivalry game, man. Like probably best rivalry game according to some people on Twitter in the history of rivalry games, right? Florida State at Miami.
Ooh.
It's again going to be another meaningful game between these two this year.
Boy. How many points is Miami going to score? And how many points is Florida State not going to score? I'll say Miami 23.
Miami minus 20.5.
That's it?
We looking at the first bet of the week.
That's it?
Yeah. 20.5. It was 19.5 like a couple hours ago, so it might be ticking up pretty quickly. And by the time we're done with recording this, it might be up to 21, 22.
All right, keep going.
Get on the phone with Pig. Michigan State at Michigan.
Oh man, what in the world between these two? Michigan. Is it at Michigan?
It's at Michigan.
Michigan 4.5.
Michigan 6.5.
Another
underdog roll for Jonathan Smith.
Yeah, I know that trend. It lived up to it again against Iowa.
Yeah. All right, 2 more. Penn State at Wisconsin.
How about the Badgers playing a little ball lately? And I know they've beaten pretty much the worst teams in the Big Ten for the most part recently, but still they're handling these teams pretty hard. I mean,
Penn State look ahead spot to Ohio State.
It is, and it's at Camp Randall.
At Camp Randall.
What time is the game?
It's a good question. I'm looking that up right now. It looks like it is at 7:30 on NBC.
Gosh, I don't know, man. Penn State is probably, I'm gonna say Penn State 10.
It's Penn State 8.5.
Okay.
A little respect for the Badgers at night.
Yeah.
Last game, 7:30 on ABC. LSU at A&M, battle for top spot in the SEC so far. Only 2 undefeated teams left in the conference.
What did you say? That game's 11 a.m.?
No, 7:30 ABC.
Okay.
Yeah, prime time.
Okay, I was about to say that better not be the 11 a.m. game.
You know, night games in Kyle Field aren't all their practice for the opposing team.
There you go. It's a good time to poke your chest out there a little bit. I'll say A&M close to a pick 'em. A&M 1.
When in doubt, if A&M's playing at home at night, 11 doesn't matter. They're always -3.
Okay, -3. That's what they were against Notre Dame, right?
That's what they were against Notre Dame. That's what they were against Mizzou. Always A&M -3. So they're basically even on the neutral field with these teams, and they're giving them a home field nod.
Yep. Okay.
So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed Week 8 as much as we did. We'll be back on Thursday to preview all the Week 9 matchups. And boy, there are a lot of them. So make sure you tune in. Make sure you follow on all of our socials. Hit us up on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And until next time,